Have you ever stopped to think that something as simple as a perfume can carry dark secrets? It seems absurd, doesn't it? After all, perfumes are just fragrances created to make people more attractive or confident. Right, wrong. I know this because I have experienced, firsthand and in spirit, the devastating consequences of choosing the wrong perfume. Today, sitting in this humble church in the countryside of Paranà while I confess everything to Father Antonio, I realize that I am still trying to understand how something so apparently harmless can take me to the limit of my faith and my sanity. My name is Gabriel, or rather, it was Gabriel. Today, I am just a man trying to rebuild his life after years immersed in darkness for almost 2 decades. I lived as a wizard, practicing occult arts and manipulating energies that should never be touched by human hands. But the truth is that it all started harmlessly, or at least that's what I thought at the time. It was in a small perfume store in downtown Sao Paulo. A discreet store with dusty windows and shelves full of shiny bottles. I found that which would change my life forever, a golden bottle with an intriguing aroma, the right perfume to bring success and prosperity. The saleswoman said that with an enigmatic smile that sent shivers down my spine, but at that moment I attributed it to the thrill of discovery. I had no idea that that bottle contained much more than a simple aroma. Today, looking back, I realized that that perfume was the first step towards the abyss. It did bring me prosperity, but it also connected me to forces that I could never imagine, forces that over time began to manifest themselves in frightening ways. At first they were small coincidences, doors that closed by themselves, whispers in the middle of the night, sensations of being watched even when I was completely alone. But soon these manifestations became more intense and more constant until there was no longer any way to deny the presence of something evil around me. But what really haunts me to this day are the marks I discovered during my time in the darkness. Marks that according to evil spiritual entities have direct connections with the devil. Some of these perfumes produced in secret and strategically distributed laboratories were designed to open unwanted spiritual portals. They are sold as normal products with pretty packaging and seductive slogans, but each bottle contains an invisible trap. Now here I am sitting in front of Father Antonio, a man of simple appearance but whose eyes transmit a wisdom that seems to span centuries. He listens patiently as I describe details that I can hardly believe I have experienced. It is difficult to put into words the weight that I carry, but I know that I have a mission to warn others about the dangers of these forbidden fragrances, because while some may see this as superstition or paranoia, I know that there are many out there using these same perfumes without any idea of the danger they are in. When I began my journey into the occult arts, I never imagined that I would get this far. I was just an ambitious young man looking for answers to questions that no one seemed able to answer. My parents were religious, but I always thought that their faith was naive, something outdated. I wanted something more tangible, something that I could control, and that is how I got in this dark world. At first it seemed innocent, simple rituals, herbs, candles, until I met someone who introduced me to a much deeper level. It was he who first told me about perfumes. He said perfumes were powerful tools capable of attracting specific energy into our lives. Each scent has a purpose. He explained some bring love, others wealth, but others have darker purposes. I laughed at the time, thinking it was just another fantasy story, but then I tried the first bottle and the result was immediate. My life began to change in ways I couldn't explain. Doors that were previously closed opened easily. People who before ignored me started to notice me. Money began to flow from unexpected sources, but over time I realized that these blessings came with a price I could never have imagined. Today, as I share my story with Father Antonio, I realize that I am still not completely free from these influences. There are times when I wake up in the middle of the night sweating cold with the certainty that something or someone is still by my side, but I also know that by telling this story I am taking the first step to free other people. Why am I sharing this with you? Because I know that there are people out there using these same perfumes without having any idea of the danger they are in, and someone needs to warn them before it is too late. After that first bottle, my life changed drastically. At first the results seemed magical. Literally, the perfume worked like a key that opened doors previously inaccessible. Businesses began to prosper, influential people sought me out, and even personal relationships blossomed in an inexplicable way. But as the months went by, I realized that something was wrong. It was not just luck or coincidence, it was something supernatural. I began to notice small changes in myself. My temperament became more aggressive, my choices more impulsive. People around me also began to move away as if they felt something strange in my presence. My family was the first to notice. "You are not the same anymore, Gabriel," my mother said during a rare visit. Her words echoed in my mind for days, but I ignored them. At the time I was obsessed with the success that perfume seemed to bring. Then one day I met someone who would change everything. His name was Jonas, a tall man with piercing eyes who always seemed more than he said. He was the one who first alerted me to the true power of the perfumes I used. "Do you know what you are invoking?" he asked me in a low, almost whispered tone while we were in an esoteric bookstore in downtown Sao Paulo. "These perfumes are not just fragrances, they are portals." I laughed. Of course, portals seemed like an absurd idea taken from a cheap fiction book, but Jonas was not joking. He explained that certain fragrances are created with specific ingredients, herbs, oils and resins obtained through occult rituals that have the power to attract spiritual entities. Some of these entities can be benevolent, but others are extremely dangerous. "Have you heard of the brand Noxitra?" he asked. I shook my head negative. "It is known among practitioners of black magic. They say that each bottle contains a cursed essence designed to open pathways to the underworld." Those words left me cold, because without knowing it I was wearing exactly that perfume. The golden bottle I had bought in that discreet store was from the brand Noxitra. Jonas continued, "The spirits that you attract with these perfumes are not grateful. They demand payment, and when they don't get what they want, they take it." I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but soon I began to notice things around me began to fall apart. Businesses that were prospering began to go bankrupt mysteriously. Close friends suffered unexplained accidents, and worst of all, my health began to deteriorate. I had constant nightmares. I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, and there were times when I felt like invisible hands were suffocating me. It was then that I decided to investigate in depth. I began to frequent occult circles looking for answers. I discovered that there are several perfume brands associated with evil practices. In addition to Noxitra, there were others like Umbra Lux and Dark Spirits. Each one of them had a different purpose. Some were used to manipulate emotions, others to attract death or destruction. But the scariest thing was that these brands were not only sold in secret stores. They were available in large retail chains disguised as normal products. The general public bought these perfumes without any idea of the harm they carried. I decided to stop using them immediately, but it wasn't that simple. The spirits I had summoned didn't accept this easily. One night, while I was sleeping, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. I opened my eyes and saw shadows moving around the room. Humanoid shapes that seemed to be watching my every move. I screamed for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. From that moment on, my life became hell. Every day was a battle against forces I couldn't see, but could clearly feel. I tried to seek help in churches, but many pastors didn't believe in the seriousness of the situation. They said this was just superstition, until I met Father Antonio. He was the first to really listen to me with infinite patience. He listened to all my stories, all my fears, and then he did something that changed everything. He performed deliverance in my house for hours. He prayed, sang psalms and burned sacred herbs. It was a distressing but necessary experience. When it was all over, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from me. But Father Antonio warned me the evil you had invoked could still return. You need to be vigilant, and he was right. There are still days when I feel that dark presence by my side. It is as if the spirits were waiting for the right moment to return. Now here I am trying to rebuild my life, but I know that my journey is not over yet. There are many things that I need to discover, many truths that are still hidden. After deliverance performed by Father Antonio, I thought I had finally found peace, but I was wrong. The evil I had invoked was not something that could be banished so easily. He was patient, shrewd, and above all persistent. One night while I was sleeping in my small house in Parana, I was awakened by a strange sound. It was as if something was scratching the walls from the outside. I got up cautiously, my heart hammering in my chest, and walked to the window. When I opened the curtain, I saw something that made me freeze to the bone. Black and shiny marks began to appear on the external wall of the house. They seemed to be written in some kind of unknown language, but at the same time familiar. It was as if those had been engraved in my mind at some point in the past. I ran to get my cell phone and immediately called Father Antonio. He answered on the second ring as if he had already been expecting my call. "They're back," was all I could say, my voice trembling. "Come to the church now," he answered without hesitation, "and bring with you all the perfumes you used." I followed his instructions and arrived at the church. I placed the bottles on the altar, each one of them glowing in a sinister way as if they contained a life of their own. "You know what you need to do," Father Antonio said, looking directly into my eyes. I knew I had to destroy them, but it wouldn't be easy. Each bottle seemed to resist my efforts. When I tried to open the first one, I felt a sharp pain in my hand as if invisible needles were piercing my skin. I screamed but kept trying. I finally managed to pour the contents of the bottle over a clay bowl filled with burning coals. What happened next? It was something I will never forget. A thick, dark smoke began to rise in the room with an unbearable smell like burning flesh mixed with sulfur. Then I heard voices whispering in a language I did not understand, but that echoed directly in my mind. They were screams of anger and pain, as if something was being ripped from this world against its will. Father Antonio began to pray loudly, his words cutting through the air like swords. "Out, evil spirits, in the name of Jesus Christ, I order you to leave this place." The smoke swirled violently, forming vortices that seemed to want to suck in everything around me. I fell to my knees, feeling as if the whole weight of the world was on me. The voices got louder and more aggressive until they suddenly stopped. The smoke dissipated and silence took over the room. But that was not the end of that night. I discovered something even more disturbing when I returned home. I found a mysterious letter on my door. There was no sender, just my name written in elegant black letters. Inside there was a list of names and addresses of people who, like me, had bought those cursed perfumes. Among these names I recognized some familiar faces. There were influential businessmen, politicians, famous artists, and even members of my own family. My sister Clara was one of them. It was then that I realized that my mission did not end there. I needed to warn these people before it was too late. But I also knew that it would not be easy. Many of them would not believe me. Others perhaps already were deeply involved with forces they could not escape. I decided to start with my sister. I went to her house the next day with a heavy heart. She had always been the person closest to me, and the idea that she could be in danger made me sick. When I got there, I found her different. Her eyes were dull, her energy seemed drained. She laughed when I mentioned the perfumes. "You are crazy, Gabriel," she said, shaking her head. "This is just religious paranoia." I tried to argue. I explained everything that had happened to me, but she simply ignored me. It was then that I noticed something on her bedside table, a bottle identical to the one I had used with the same golden symbol from the brand Noxitra. I left there with a huge weight on my heart. I knew I could not force her to believe me, but I also knew I needed to find another way to help her. The following days were a race against time. I began to investigate the other names on the list, visiting them one by one. Some were fine, others were already showing signs of possession or desperation. One man in particular marked me deeply. He was a successful businessman, but his life had completely fallen apart. He had lost everything: his fortune, his family, his mental health. When I found him, he was living in an abandoned shack, mumbling incoherent words to himself. "It was the perfume," he said. His glassy eyes fixed on me. He promised prosperity but took my soul. Those words haunted me for weeks. I knew I was dealing with something much bigger than I could imagine, and despite all my attempts to warn people, many of them remained blind to the danger. But the worst part was yet to come. As I investigated more about the origin of these perfumes, I discovered something that would change everything. They were manufactured by a secret organization whose goal was to infiltrate these evil fragrances into global society. It was a meticulously elaborate plan designed to open portals to the underworld en masse. Now more than ever I needed to find a way to stop this. But how to face something so big, so powerful? After that discovery about the secret organization behind the cursed perfumes, my life became a roller coaster of emotions and dilemmas. I knew that I could not fight something so big alone, but I also knew that there was no other choice. It was as if destiny had chosen me for this mission, or maybe it was just the consequence of my own mistakes. The first thing I did was go back to Father Antonio. He was the only person I could trust completely. When I arrived at the church, he was sitting on a wooden bench reading the Bible. Under the dim light of a candle, he seemed tired, but his eyes still shone with determination. Unshakable Father, my voice trembling, I discovered something terrible. I told him everything about the list of names, about the people who were already suffering, about the secret organization and its plan to open portals to the underworld en masse. He listened in silence, his hands folded on his lap. When I finished, he sighed deeply and said, "You know what this means, don't you know this is not just about you anymore, it's about saving souls." Those words hit me like a punch in the stomach. Saving souls like me, a former wizard who had been plunged into darkness for so long, could be responsible for something so great. But Father Antonio was right, there was no more room for doubt or hesitation. I decided I needed to act fast. I gathered all the information I had about the organization and the perfumes, including the names of the brands and the ingredients used in their manufacture. I did incessant research trying to understand how these fragrances worked and to neutralize them. Each perfume had a specific evil effects, but applying these antidotes would not be easy. Many of the people on the list, each attempt at intervention seemed like an epic battle between good and evil, and I often came out defeated. A particularly difficult case was that of a young musician named Raphael. He was talented and charismatic, but his life had fallen apart after using one of the perfumes. His songs, before full of joy and hope, were now dark and disturbing. When I found him, he was locked in his apartment surrounded by black candles and occult symbols drawn on the walls. "Get me out of here," he whispered when he saw me, his eyes red from crying. I didn't want this, I just wanted success. I tried to perform the purification ritual right there, but the evil forces surrounding him were powerful. The candles went out by themselves, the prayers failed to resonate in the environment, and the spirits mocked me. Finally I decided to take him to the church, where Father Antonio managed to free him. Those moments of victory were rare. Most of the time I would leave frustrated and desperate, wondering if I was really making any difference. There were nights when I would kneel on the floor of my room crying and begging for strength, why I would ask heaven why I was chosen for this. But little by little I began to realize something important. This was not just about saving others, it was also about saving myself. Every time I helped someone, every time I faced the forces of darkness, I redeemed myself a little more for my own sins. It was during this process that I rediscovered my faith, not the blind and naive faith that I despised in my youth, but a genuine faith based on real experiences and hard lessons. I began to attend church regularly,